Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're talking about Elden Ring NightReign. This is a game that's going to be coming this year, probably in the first quarter, but definitely probably within the first 6 months of 2025. This is a game that is, well, it's I'm cautiously excited about this. I think it could work out really, really well, but also I think it could underperform due to not meeting expectations. So let's talk about this. This isn't necessarily to dissuade people either way. This is more just to give information that we do actually know about the game. Someone has been able to play test at IGN and was able to share this. Link will be down in the description below. This is to go over the information and just for people to decide for themselves with the fullest picture they can have whether this is for them or not. And I'm taking that with the same idea. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is not Elden Ring 2. This is not some big full expansion. Instead, this is a solo/co-op dungeon runner or roguelite type of game. The idea is you'll start and have 15 minutes to level up your character in a certain area of the Elden Ring map. You'll be able to level up, you'll be able to gain flasks during the day, and then when night comes, within 15 minutes, then you're going to have a boss fight that you'll have to deal with. This boss will appear, and if you succeed in, killing them or whatever, you'll move on to the next day, with each boss likely getting harder until the end-game boss. Looks like we'll actually have 3 days total for the actual run. And 15 minutes does seem pretty short in an Elden Ring game. But, you can basically use birds as gliders. So you can move around the map a heck of a lot faster. You can also just run by sites of grace to refill your flasks. So you don't have to sit down or anything. Also, leveling up is kind of automatic. So instead of choosing what traits you want to level up, your subclass will determine what traits will level every time you gain a level. And so you won't have to choose, you won't have to cherry pick, you won't have to think about your build or whatever. Your classes will be predetermined, and that'll predetermine what traits actually level up. So that'll be interesting. Well, we know that we'll have 8 different in-game bosses, and these will be randomized. So again, if you can make it through all 3 days, then you can finally get to the in-game boss for your play session. These again, they'll be randomized. Some of these we'll recognize. There's at least 2 or 3 that are brand new that we've never seen before. But some of these assets are taken from Dark Souls 3 and also from Elden Ring. And probably too, I would assume, also the DLC. There are also other random bosses that you'll encounter during the day. Plus, you'll have a boss each night. And then you'll finally have the in-game boss at the end. So these runs are going to be pretty long. You're probably looking at roughly about an hour of play. Because again, each day is going to be 15 minutes. You're going to have a boss fight after each day. And then at the very end, you're going to have the main boss fight. So let me take a drink of water here. So the dungeon area itself looks like it'll be in Limgrave. That's at least the gameplay that we got to see. But it will be randomized with each play. So don't count on your memory. Things are going to be different. As you explore, you can kind of start anywhere. And then as time passes, there will be a ring, a perimeter, that will slowly shrink over time, narrowing your playable area. Just like a Battle Royale game. You can think of that mechanic just like that. Outside of the perimeter is acid rain. This will kill you if you stay out there. It will quickly dwindle your health, so you'll have a little bit of grace there, but not too much. And so, the idea is you have to stay within the ring. And you never know exactly where the ring or how the ring is going to shrink. And so you have to pay attention to that as you're playing or as you're dealing with random enemies or kind of like big enemy encounters and things like that. Each session 2 will also have a changing of landscape features. So sometimes you'll have an active volcano, sometimes you'll have a forest of rot or a myriad of other things. Also, there'll be random events in the world that will change gameplay. So it's like literally everything, where you're going to play, how the circle is going to shrink for you, the type of enemies or bosses you're going to encounter, and then also the random events in the game are all going to change. And to the big parts of the landscape as well, just like the active volcano, which you'll have to watch out for. So all of these are going to be randomized and are going to be probably keep it fairly fresh for quite some time. There's also 8 classes to choose from. There's basically kind of an idea of 4, and then you can kind of think of like paired subclasses together, ones that focus on a certain aspect but are maybe slightly different than their other pair. And so these will decide what your stats are, what your weapons are, and your strengths and weaknesses. It's not like you're going to be able to choose really what type of weapon you want, what type of spells or incantations. So if you have a particular build in Elden Ring, you can probably scrap that out the window. There will just be a generic or general class that you'll pick. And then as you level up through the game, those traits will be the ones that will actually scale up with your leveling. There will also be some unique abilities and some skills. These will have cooldown times, so it's not like you're going to be able to spam these to death, but you will be able to use these special abilities. And some of these are actually quite unique. One of them is like soaring up into the air and coming down with a massive like gravity slam into the ground to create an AoE effect on the enemies around you. So there's going to be different types of those that we're going to see. Death 2 isn't quite the end. There will be basically like a last stand mode. So you can crawl on the ground as you've gone down. Your teammates can attack you to build up your bar, and then when your bar is full, you'll be able to get back up again and play around. Once all 3 of you die, or once you die if you're playing solo, you'll have to start over. Your session's done and you got to start all the way over again. As far as we know, so far there is only solo or 3 players. There are no pairs. And so I know like Lion and I, we've always paired together and played with just 2 of us. And so that's kind of a bummer for us because we really like having just the 2 of us. Sometimes we run into really cool people like Vancouver and play with them and have a blast. But yeah, generally speaking, most of us just like sticking with our friend group, and we all know why. It's not always the best experience sometimes. There is also going to be a playtest in February. These are basically to test the servers before actual launch. So we can probably see the launch of NightReign at the earliest. My guess is probably in March, maybe April, sometime in there. And we'll get more info then when people actually have the playtest. We'll see what they can talk about. Again, there is a link down in the description below if you're interested. And this guy just basically played the alpha. So there's probably some changes by then, some differences. But let's get into some of the things that I'm excited or have concerns about. So these aren't in any particular order. These are just as I thought of them. So my first thought was, what in the world is this? Because I remember seeing the trailer at the Game Awards. It was just thinking, what kind of a game is this? I'm glad we had someone at IGN that was able to explain and was able to actually play test some and even able to give some gameplay that they were able to share. I've also had some time to think about it, and I'm not sure if this standalone game is necessarily for me, and so I'll explain why. I worry first about the replayability. We have a total of 8 in-game bosses, and no apparent in-game past that. So, again, it's not the bosses that you'll encounter after each day. It's at the very end of your session. There will be 8 type of bosses there, and you won't know which one you have until you actually get there. So there will be a point where everybody has been able to run through all 8 of those bosses, has seen the new bosses, like the 3-headed dog is one of them. And so, yeah, we'll get to play these, we'll learn the movesets, and we'll kind of know these bosses pretty well to defeat them fairly easy, especially in a team of 3. But yeah, there's supposed to be this kind of never-ending struggle against the knight. So again, it's not like there's actually an end game for the game. It's just a dungeon runner, and you just keep running the dungeon. And of course, these are fun. These are usually quite interesting, and we enjoy them. And there's usually a lot of replayability. Part of my concern, though, is that if there's only 8 bosses, in-game bosses, this can kind of be repetitive after a while. Because once we get all 8 and we actually know them fairly well, how many times are you really going to keep playing? Maybe then it's to kind of help other players. We do have a really good community in Elden Ring, generally speaking, where there's a lot of cooperation. People are willing to help. People are looking to, engage and make new friends that way, and that's wonderful. But we also know this was confirmed that there's no live service for the game. There's no seasons. There's no battle pass. There's no DLCs. So while we can also think that that's a really good thing, right? It's not going to be scarred by microtransactions and whatever and needless things to grind for. It is something where it's like, are we really only going to get these 8 in-game bosses? Because I would kind of like some more. I'd be willing to pay for some DLC or whatever to actually get another like group of 3 or 4 in-game bosses, warp all that into the mix, or even kind of come up with different playlists that we can do for different regions or whatever, or even make your own. How cool would that be? You can make your own dungeon, and then people can come in and try your dungeon and rate it, see if they like it or don't like it. I think that would be pretty cool. So getting more bosses through updates would actually be nice, but I'm not sure if we're actually going to get that. As of right now, there's no plans. It's just the 8 that we get. The multiplayer also doesn't allow pairs. As we said, you have to add a third person, and this can actually be pretty frustrating for many of us as we don't like filling in the gap in our team with randoms. Sometimes that can be a horrible experience. We also don't know about disconnect issues. We do know that the game actually scales up when there's 3 of you. And so if you lose 1 or you lose 2 and you're by yourself, is the game going to scale back down automatically? Or is it going to stay at that scale level? That'll make it pretty much impossible for some people because, again, you can't really kind of tweak your class or your traits. It's all preset for you. Or even your weapon. It's just you got what you got. And there's going to be a more heavily reliance on team members helping you out and working cohesively as a team than just one-shotting everything by yourself. With solo, though, we do know that if you are going to go solo, it will scale down for you. Are we going to be waiting for queues for the third person? Again, there's quite a few people that like to play in pairs, and so you're going to have to wait for that third person. And as the game naturally gets less and less players over time, however long that takes, you'll probably wait longer and longer in queues until eventually it's just not that fun anymore, or maybe you get kicked out and have to re-queue up again after, such amount of time. So this can kind of also negatively impact the experience once we get to that point in the game. So it's not likely a problem again initially. There'll be plenty of people that want to try the game at launch. But again, as it wanes, it can be harder and harder to actually get people. The playstyle is going to be limited to your class that are all predetermined. Your weapons, your spells, probably too your talismans, if you even have them, and also what you find out there in the field. You're going to have to rely pretty heavily on your teammates. If you've relied heavily on certain loadouts or a certain playstyle with certain weapons, etc., this likely is going to be kind of a different challenge for you. And maybe that's exactly what you're looking for, which is great. But again, it's not going to be the same type of gaming experience. And so folks are going to have to get good at the game. They're going to have to rely on their players. And maybe ultimately, too, this is a good thing. Everybody knowing that they got to rely on each other can really create a really cool, awesome experience of co-op. And you can also make friends that way, too. And that's better for everybody. But it can also be frustrating for some, making players want to quit. Because, again, they're being forced to play in kind of a limited way. And that's not the funnest experience for everybody. Elden Ring, along with the other Dark Souls games, they've done a great job of continuing to innovate and expand the replayability, trying different classes, different spells, different weapons, different animations, different abilities with those weapons and armor and everything. It's actually gotten pretty good where there's a ton of things to actually try, and instead of that, they're replacing it with the environment. And we'll see how people feel about that when the game comes out. I hope there's enough replayability there. I really do. Because honestly, I want to enjoy it too. Honestly, I think, as I've pondered this for a while, I think the game should have been a DLC, not a standalone game. Or it should have been a game mode that was attached to Elden Ring. I don't imagine the game mode would have been super big, at least for gigabytes, for storage space. I also don't think it should be too expensive. Something like this that's not going to expand or grow, as far as we know, shouldn't be, in my opinion, like a $60 or $70 game. It should be cheaper than that. And so I am curious how much this is going to cost. For me personally, it's somewhere between $30 and $40 for the experience. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be waiting. And it makes me think too of the Bloodborne dungeons. This was actually built right into the game. For those that have played Bloodborne, you know you got chalice every so often. You're able to take a chalice and work on setting it down at a certain pedestal, and it would create a random dungeon for you. And they were actually really fun. And once you got to the end, you basically got the next chalice, if I remember correctly, and then you were able to move on to the next type of dungeon. But it, within a certain range, was able to create a certain length of the dungeon, certain puzzles in the dungeon, certain enemies and classes or number of enemies you were going to deal with, and also boss fights at the end. And it kind of makes me wonder if this is where this idea actually came from. But again, this was actually part of the game. This was free, and if I remember correctly, we had maybe a total of 6 chalices. Quite a few. Maybe 8? I don't know, I can't quite remember. The pedestals just went up the stairs for those that remember, like I do. But yeah, once you completed the dungeon, you got another chalice for a harder, more difficult dungeon, and let me tell you, it was actually quite challenging right there at the end. But it was all single player. There was no multiplayer involved. And you were also able to take whatever build you had. Just the dungeon changed for you. But this is going to be like a world dungeon that's changing and also shrinking at the same time. So there's going to be a lot of randomization. There's going to be a lot of different types of playthroughs and stuff. And it should honestly be pretty fun. I'm just not sure if 8 in-game bosses are going to be enough to have us want to pay, want us have to pay for something that's full price on this. Because again, once you've done all 8, once you've seen them all, once you've kind of learned their move sets, and you've, done helping out some other people, are you going to play 30 hours, 50 hours? 50 hours would definitely be a huge chunk of time. That would probably definitely be worth your money, but I don't know. For me personally, I kind of want it to be around 30 or 40 bucks. Because again, I feel like it should be an addition to Elden Ring, not a standalone game. Again, I'd be willing to pay 40 bucks for DLC for this, for a game mode. I think that'd be great. And it would also make more sense. But having a standalone game that's a dungeon runner or a roguelike game just is kind of different. This also, too, is not made by the original creator of Dark Souls and Elden Ring. I think it's his son. It's somebody else. And so, again, and we're using old assets, almost all old assets. Again, there's going to be a few new bosses in there. And really, we'll have to see what playtests are going to be like, what it's going to feel like, and even when people start playing it and broadcasting this, streaming it, we'll have to see what gameplay is and if it's really for us or not. Because I think some people are really going to enjoy this. Again, it's just more Elden Ring. It's kind of a new take on it, and it's going to be a heck of a lot easier, too, to do multiplayer. You can just hop in with folks, and there you go. You don't have to do the whole sign thing and try to find people and call someone in and see if you get them. Maybe someone else got to them first. You don't have to deal with any of that. I also don't think you're going to have to deal with any invaders, as so far we haven't been able to see anything like that. So if invaders can actually be removed from the game, man, that sounds great. That sounds pretty good. So I love From Software games. Again, I've been playing since 1998, since Armored Core Project Phantasma on the PlayStation 1. I've been doing that forever. I love their games. They've made wonderful. Yet I believe the changes to this formula isn't going to be for everybody. And also, too, myself personally, I think of it more of like a value proposition. Do I really want to spend up to maybe $60 for a game that I may only play a little bit? Or I might get frustrated with? Again, everything's kind of preset. We're not going to have some of these other types of features, and we're going to have some of the gameplay mechanics from like battle royales. And that might be some bad memories for some people. But yeah, this might be too small of a game to be standalone. Because again, we're not getting updates as far as we know. We're not getting DLCs, which I hope I am wrong about that. I hope IGN, the guy that tested it, is wrong about that too. I do hope From Software actually changes their mind, because I think they might have a type of real DLC live service game on their hands that could honestly be pretty fun. But then too, I think about the Chalice and Bloodborne. That was just an addition to the game. If you wanted to play it, cool. If not, that's okay. And I think this would work great as a game mode for Elden Ring. So what do you guys think? Is this something you're interested in? That's what I see online. And I know I'm kind of going against the grain here because, again, it's a From Software game. They've made wonderful games. I agree. But they've also never made a game like this before. And while I'm excited about the prospect, I'm intrigued about the gameplay and the people I could meet and the type of experiences that I could have and how varied they can be. I'm also kind of cautious. Not because it's different, but because how much are they going to charge for this? For a game that's going to have 8 randomized bosses with no updates. And I hope they do update it. That would be great. Again, there is going to be a playtest in February. You can register on January 10th to see if you can get a code to actually be a part of the playtest. That's what I'm going to do. I probably won't be able to share anything, but honestly, I want to get my hands on it myself so that I can have more information about the game. So if you enjoyed this, folks, I don't do these all the time. This is just part of some of the stuff that I do on the channel. But if you do enjoy it, you can like, sub, all that jazz at Gaming Garbage 22 over at YouTube. Also, there's also Discord, Twitter X, and also Twitch. You can follow me at Twitch over there if you'd like, because everything gets posted there first because I use the files, improve them a little bit, make some differences, and then put them over to YouTube. So that sounds interesting. Thanks for subbing. Thanks for taking a look. And hey, hopefully I'll see you guys on NightReign. And with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one.